have been found guilty of crimes against the French Revolution. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. It's
The Global History Show with Mr. Benjamin. This episode, the French Revolution and Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yee-hoo! So excited!
It's Global History Show.
Learning targets for this episode. I can explain multiple causalities of French Revolution. I can describe important events of the French Revolution. I can contrast the successes and failures of Napoleon Bonaparte.
Conditions prior to the French Revolution set the stage for rebellion. Change had momentum. Europe was going through the commercial revolution, the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, Protestant Reformation, changes brought about by the Columbian Exchange and Enlightenment, all of which were challenging the old traditional ways and beliefs. The Enlightenment, a European intellectual and cultural shift in 1780 to 1800, in which philosophers and artists promoted reason and human freedom over the traditions and religion of the Middle Ages. Enlightenment thinker John Locke said governmental power comes from the people and not from God. This idea would replace the divine right authority of absolute monarchies of Europe. Locke also said that people have natural rights and that the role of the government is to protect people's natural rights. If the government fails to protect people's rights, the people have the obligation to overthrow and replace the government. The Enlightenment thinker Jean-Jacques Rousseau said that government rules according to a social contract with the people and must therefore rule as the people want them to. Enlightenment thinkers wrote about equality in power and rights. The printing press helped to spread these ideas. They arrested me for violating human rights. Good thing they didn't find out about all those human laughs. France had an absolute monarchy under King Louis XVI. They based their authority to rule on divine right. Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette and the noble class lived lavish lifestyles. They lived off the taxes of the poor. The government cared nothing for the needs of the people, but only to maintain their life of privilege. For generations, the royal family had borrowed and spent and taxed. France had increased debt due to generations of spending by the king and supporting the American Revolution, as well as the expense of other foreign wars, especially against England. The conditions in France were highly unequal and bad for the lower classes, setting the stage for a demand for change. The estate system, with the Estates General, a sort of representative body of government, a social and political system divided society into three groups. The first estate were the nobles. The second estate were the clergy, Roman Catholic Church officials. Together, they made up 3% of the population. The third estate represented the rest of French society, 97%, and included peasant workers, city laborers, and were led by the bourgeoisie, wealthy business people. The first and second estate paid little to no taxes. The third estate paid taxes to the king's government and to the first and second estate. In matters of government, each estate had one vote each. The first and second estates voted together and always outvoted the third estate, 97% of the population. In a democracy, your vote counts. In the estate system, your count votes. A rising middle class, the bourgeoisie, had wealth but resented the privilege and power of the nobility. They were socially aware and ready to lead the people against the kings and nobles. The example of the American Revolution showed that government based on Enlightenment ideas of government by the people, a democratic republic, could replace an absolute monarchy. The British also had a limited monarchy. 2 bad growing seasons in a row resulted in an agricultural collapse and widespread food shortages, famine. The economic crisis sparked the beginning of the revolution. The king, in an attempt to raise new taxes, called for the Estates General to meet for the first time in 175 years. Representatives of the Third Estate, anticipating being outvoted, demanded a greater say. The First and Second Estate responded by locking the doors to the meeting place in the Palace of Versailles. The representatives of the Third Estate found another room, the tennis courts, where they could meet. They declared themselves the National Assembly, the true government of France, and vowed to write a constitution. This was the tennis court oath. The king, fearing both food riots in the streets and rebellion, called troops back to Paris, presumably to arrest and execute the National Assembly. The people of Paris, angered by this action, stormed the Bastille, a prison, armory, and symbol of the power of the king. The revolution had begun. The new government of France, while in turmoil, abolished the feudal system and serfdom. The Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizens was signed, the Constitution creating a constitutional limited monarchy. It affirmed the ideas of the Enlightenment about rights and equality. Many nobles fled to other European countries that were still led by absolute monarchy. Reformers, radicals, sought to make even more sweeping changes. A group called the Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, were elected. Robespierre was the director of the Committee of Public Safety and launched the Reign of Terror.
Robespierre, reign of terror, guillotine chopping necks. Nobles dead, they've lost their head, and Napoleon's on his way. Hey!
First, they arrested, tried, and executed people who publicly supported the king. But the Reign of Terror spread until everyone lived in fear of being accused as an enemy of the revolution. Over 20,000 people were executed by guillotine. Maximilien Robespierre told a bad joke to the Committee of Public Safety, and everybody laughed. I guess it's all in the execution. In 1791, the king was caught trying to flee the country. The king and his family were arrested, and the king was tried for treason against the revolution. The king was tried, convicted, and beheaded. 9 months later, Queen Marie Antoinette was executed. The guillotine was the cutting edge of technology at its time. The motto of the French Revolution was Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, meaning rights, equality, and nationalism. The Reign of Terror ended with the execution of Robespierre himself. Meanwhile, France was at war with neighboring monarchs of Austria-Hungary and Prussia, whose leaders feared that success of the revolution in France would lead to rebellions and calls for equality and rights in their kingdom. France instituted the first military draft, and the French army increased their numbers of soldiers until France had the largest army in the world. They also ended promotion based on social class. A successful general and hero of the war, Napoleon Bonaparte seizes power in a coup d'etat, or military overthrow of the government. The people of France accepted Napoleon's rule because he promised an end to the chaos, looting and bread riots due to food shortages in Paris and other cities of France, and victory for France over the kings of Europe. Napoleon declared himself Emperor of France and claimed he would promote the democratic values of the French Revolution. Teaching the animals was going well until the chickens read a book on democracy and they staged a coup d'etat. Napoleon Bonaparte attempted to conquer all of Europe and nearly succeeded. He created the Napoleonic Code, a system of laws based on Enlightenment ideas. His conquest spread the ideas of the Enlightenment to conquered areas of Europe. He conquered all of Europe except Great Britain and Russia. Great Britain was protected by the English Channel and a greater navy. Russia was protected by its tremendous size as a country and their cold climate. Napoleon instituted the continental system, outlawing trade between mainland Europe and Great Britain. The Russian Tsar announced that Russia would openly trade with Great Britain. Napoleon invaded Russia. The Tsar of Russia instituted the scorched earth policy. Russian troops retreated and burned Russian homes and fields so that the French troops would have no place to shelter from the cold Russian winter, and the French would have to rely on food transported all the way from France. Napoleon attacked and captured Moscow, the capital of Russia. He thought that he had won the war. Moscow was burning. The Russian troops counterattacked. French troops, who were tired and cold, had summer uniforms and holes in their boots, were defeated. They retreated all the way back to France with tremendous losses. Just 2 battles later, Napoleon was arrested and exiled twice before he died of syphilis-related illnesses on an island in the Atlantic Ocean. Why did Napoleon only eat chicken wings? He didn't like defeat. Where did Napoleon keep his armies? Up his sleeves. In the course of the revolution, France had had 3 constitutions and 5 governments within 10 years. The King of Austria-Hungary, along with other monarchs of Europe, attempted to turn back the changes that Napoleon had brought to Europe. The French Revolution was followed by decades of conflict between monarchy and rebellion. In time, Europe would be led by bourgeoisie-led republics based on Enlightenment ideas.
Well, that's it for the show. No, the reign of terror is long over. I know a well-informed citizenry is dangerous to tyrants and absolute monarchs, but I'm a teacher. It is not the same thing.
It's a